just want to say a warm welcome to everybody. Dorcas and I will introduce ourselves right now. It's wonderful to be together. I think we just put this call out to come together about a week ago. And here we are across countries in all our various diversities. So my name is Althea Banda-Hansmann. I'm a coach, organizational development consultant, and spiritual director. And I'm drawn to the work of healing from racism because I was born into the fractures of racism under apartheid. I came out of my mother's womb as my family was being forced removed from a white community to Manenberg, a so-called colored community, almost like the projects. And so I do this work because I can't but recover from racism and gather community for healing and a return to love. Over to you, Dorcas.
So my name is Dorcas. I'm a white American using she, her pronouns. I've been married for 36 years to a Black mixed race South African. I lived in South Africa for 12 years. I gave birth to 2 daughters there who are now grown. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. And I am a retired registered nurse, currently providing spiritual direction, mentoring to individuals, and I'm writing a book. I continue to advocate for the underserved. My interest in doing the work of racism and healing is my love for community and Ubuntu. I still believe that individuals can truly find each other amid diversity. I refuse to give up that hope. And so my experiences, I've seen the devastating effects racism has done both in Jackson, Mississippi, in my own country, and in South Africa. And my experiences have given me many opportunities to learn and grow and discover my own white privilege and journey to healing. It is my pleasure to be involved with all of you, not as an expert, but as a partner in the struggle.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. And I want to emphasize that point that you made. We do come as holders of the space, but inviting joint expertise, because you have experience and expertise that we don't. Some of the expertise we share, some of the expertise we might have that you don't, and we really are all in this together. I want to create some space for us to pause and just do a short grounding, centering exercise. And so I want to invite you to free yourself from whatever you have in your hands, and just place your hands either palms up or palms down on your lap, and see to what extent you can relax your back, if you can, against the chair or where you're sitting. Just relax. Either closing your eyes or keeping them 45-degree angle down. When we have trauma, sometimes it's not so easy to have the eyes closed. And take 3 deep breaths into your belly. Take a moment just to reconnect with your body, with our bodies. Noticing the sensations that you might be feeling. Maybe there's tension, stress. Nothing to change about how we're feeling in our body. Just notice without judgment. And also notice what's working well in our bodies. Perhaps noticing a place where the body is strong and it feels great to be in your body. From this place of being connected to our bodies, let's give gratitude to our ancestors who came before us. We are here because they gave birth to us. And you say, thank you. We are here because of you. I just invite you, if you can, to notice the ways in which your ancestors survived racism. Perhaps there was a freezing, a tightening. Perhaps there was a fight. Perhaps a flight. Or a fawn just folding in, collapsing. Perhaps there was something else. And we give thanks for how our ancestors found their ways of surviving. Sometimes we ask, how did you survive? However did you survive? Taking another 3 breaths into your belly. I just invite you to notice the feelings in your back. The back always starts by the nape of the neck. Notice the feelings in the top of your back. The sensations in the middle of your back. The sensations in your lower back. We tend to brace ourselves with our back. Sometimes we brace ourselves from harm, and our back helps us hold a lot. Just see if you can lightly, slightly let go or loosen, just relax your back by taking a deep breath and releasing tension that might be in your back. Thank your back for holding you upright in the wall. Now, invite you to bring your awareness to your chest, the heart area. Just notice the mood or the feeling in your heart area. For some of us, we have to stay a little bit longer to sense and have access to the feeling. In your story of healing from racism, what emotions do you most connect to? Is it guilt? Perhaps shame or rage? Anger, grief? Perhaps there's another emotion. Just notice that too. Give thanks for your heart area that helps us to feel, helps us to connect to others, helps us hold community. And now bringing your attention to what has brought you here today. And just notice what brought you here today. And give thanks to what brought you here. And even if it's a difficult thing that brought you here, I invite you to give thanks for the work of healing and the work of hope that might be as a result of the difficulty that brought you here. So we'll just be in about 30 to 40 seconds of stillness before we end this time. When you are ready, you can gently open your eyes. Over to you, Dorcas.
So I think in the chat, is there a question in there? So what we were wanting is for you in one very short sentence to share with us what brings you to the workshop today. So if you are willing to just say that out, that would be great. And then you can invite another person to speak if you would like to, as you see the names, or you can just stop and I will invite another person, whatever's easy for you. So what brought you here?
I'm happy to go first, if that's all right.
Yep, just jump in.
So I am from South Africa, and during the pandemic, my grandfather passed away and I started a virtual funeral business. And that led to another storytelling project called Dienstvlug.org, where I started interviewing veterans from the border war in South Africa. And I realized that the wounds of racism in South Africa amongst white men in their 60s come from that time. And my father was also in that war. All the people that I grew up with, all the father figures in my life grew up in that war. And this is just my attempt to understand where that hatred comes from and that hurt.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just feel free.
I'll speak. I'm Nancy. I'm actually Dorcas's sister, and I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with my youngest daughter, April. It's been a combination of things that well, let me back up. I've been interested and learning about race and white supremacy, especially in our country. Beginning with my time in Jackson, Mississippi, and moving forward. I have 3 grown children who are biracial, who identify as Black. And in this time in my life, when I'm retired, I'm learning from them so much. I have along the way, but And so part of my impetus for joining this meeting today actually came from my youngest daughter, who said, Mom, first of all, support Aunt Dorcas. And second of all, it would be good just to be part of a group that is speaking about things that interest you or that interest me. And that is what put me then, I decided to reschedule my appointment that conflicted with this time. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rohanna. I work for the healthcare system in the UK, the NHS, National Health Service, and I work in organisational development. And one of my key work streams is around anti-racism. So I'm currently working on a behavioural change programme, bringing our white colleagues and our people of colour colleagues together to work on this on a systemic level, whilst acknowledging I get triggered left, right and centre every day doing this work. So managing my own state in this space. So that's what brings me here today, because the title of the session really drew me. I'm trying to move away from the good, bad narrative that's been associated with racism for so long, which I believe blocks the work of healing. And that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I will go next if that's fine. I'm here today because I work in a situation where there is older people working with me. I'm one of the junior members working at the organization, and I'm the one that sits with the traumas of the past, where the older people are in heavy conflict with each other, pointing fingers, shouting at each other during meetings. And I'm the one that's supposed to help them manage this situation. They were all invited to this meeting as well, and it looks like only I showed up, which also says something about their willingness. So I sit with that struggle. So hopefully after today I can go in a direction at least.
Wow, thank you.
One of your team members is just joining now, Derek.
Yay. Can I go next?
Yes, please do.
So I'm Serene. I'm here for a number of reasons. One of which is I've always wanted to be part of a process led by Althea. That's one reason. Another is that I too work in the space of inclusion, diversity and equity. And as a person who holds space for others to have conversations like this, I feel it's important for me to remain connected to my own story and my own journey. And so this came up as a wonderful opportunity for me to reconnect and stay connected to that which is true for me now, and that which perhaps was true and is shifting for me in the past. But yeah, just to kind of have some more honest conversation and reflection about where I find myself in this space. So thanks for the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. So Derek, welcome. We are sharing why we are here today. So take a few minutes to think about it and let somebody else. There's a couple others that have not shared yet. So feel free, those who have not shared, to jump in. We really would like to hear everyone's voice.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm Carol. I live in the Western Cape, South Africa, and I'm a retired medical practitioner. I've always worked in what we call day hospitals, and the last place I worked before I retired was a children's AIDS clinic. I am now involved in a feeding scheme for people living in Langa, which is one of our Black townships. And the reason I joined this is because I have such anger inside me. I suffer from depression as well, and I'm sure that part of that is due to the anger. Just walking around Langa, there are so many people, especially the elderly, caught my eye one day. They look so sad. They've got so little compared to so many other people in South Africa. And one just feels helpless. At the moment, our feeding scheme is really struggling. And I know that friends of mine have lots and lots of money, but they don't even donate anything to us. Just the anger also obviously comes from childhood, discovering that I'm called a colored. And that's not that I wanted to be white, but as my father drummed into us, you are not colored, you are South African, you're a person. And just all the injustice that was done to people who were not white, just still makes me angry. I have a friend who was at school with me, and she's still a friend, who was arrested and tortured in jail because she was an anti-apartheid activist. She also still suffers. She's an author now and a journalist. But from time to time, she can barely function because of the depression. Okay, that's me.
Thank you. Thank you.
I come to this meeting for different reasons. I'm Dorcas's sister and Nancy's sister. I have an interest in anti-race work. I have a lot of grief associated with color and my association with color. I am retired at this point, never really actually had a full-time job as such. Well, I did for a few years, but raised a family and still have a husband and grandchildren and nieces and nephews. And we identify with 4 surrogate grandchildren of color and many other people. And I'm very hopeful that somehow my little contributions to the cause will make a difference, will show my interest and hope. And yes, I realize, one thing that I do is I have volunteered at a thrift shop for the last 40 years, and the proceeds from that from that thrift shop help world situations. And so that's one way that I've been involved over the years, and with my family. So yes, that's why I wanted to join.
Thank you. So I realize time is going. There's 2 people. I think we lost someone. Is that right? So
yeah, we lost Derek.
Yes. I'm going to mispronounce your name, Mueller. I don't want to call you out. Do you have anything to say, or would you like to pass?
Now, I wrote something on the chat.
Oh, okay.
But I can just put background to it. I grew up in a missions, on the mission field and in a church context. For quite a few years, I've been in missions myself. But whilst I so wanted to be in ministry, in a cross-cultural sense, I never got the opportunity. So I've been in ministry, in church context, always in white communities. And there are so many opportunities, both locally and regionally. I'm nearing my retirement, which will be forced retirement, but I'll probably go on. But officially, I'll jump the boat in 3 years' time. And there are so many opportunities, and for me to just give structure to some of it, both locally and especially regionally and with groups. So just to give structure, and this will be an opportunity to take it there.
Thank you. So, Zipporah, can you hear me? You are muted. Do you want to say what brought you to today? Zippy, you're muted if you're trying to say anything. Okay.
Wake up on my technical side today, obviously.
There you are. 1 or 2 sentences about what brought you to today.
Yeah, I came in today. I'm invited by Dorcas, and thank you very much for that. But background, I'm from Kenya, lived in the United States, and experienced what racism would look like, and also vicariously experienced that. And Dorcas and I have had lots of conversations around this topic and how we've come to cope with it in our various corners and mutually. So I'm happy to be part of the ongoing conversation. Thanks for the space and time.
Thank you, Zippy. I think that's everyone, and I believe we did lose someone. So I think we can move on to the next session. So that's back to you, Althea.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. And just take a moment to notice the emotional field of what brings you here. You know, Anelia, during COVID, I also lost a friend, a new friend who was in his 60s and who fought in the border wars. Lost him by suicide. And so we hold the veterans who fought the wars and have no place to process the remains of the wars. We just hold them with us. Thank you for sharing. So just to say a little bit of our intention of the time together and some ways that you might want to consider how to hold the conversation today. So, what we want to invite curiosity, and we want to invite to give voice to contemplative practice as a pathway to racial healing. We'll explore a little bit in a moment or so what contemplative practice is. And then we're going to invite you into creating and discussing your racial timeline. That's what the inviting around drawing and writing is about. And in that process, you know, notice whatever we are talking about, what you're noticing in your body, in our collective body, in your feelings, just notice what arises while recognizing racialized dominance and inferiority. So by the age that we are between 4 and 6, white children have learned and they know that they are superior to Black people, to Black or Indigenous people of color. Between the ages of 4 to 6, people of color, children of color, have internalized by modeling that we are inferior to white people. And so this is part of the healing work to come back to our real value of who we are. And we hope that in some way, all of us will be able to surface or welcome your own hope for ongoing racial healing. So this is our hopes for the time, and some ways that you might think about holding your own self or work with yourself. We invite you to use I statements, not you, or not speaking for everyone, but speak only for yourself. We invite you to tell the truth of who you are, the truth of your experience, what is true for you. There's healing in truth telling. Speak once before speaking twice, so that most or everyone's voices is heard, because our time is short. And if you can, we invite you just to pause, even if it's like 20 seconds or 30 seconds, to pause between speakers so that we can absorb what's being said. Be aware of both intent and impact of your words and your actions. If you ever found yourself in a position of being hurt, you knew exactly what the impact was. And sometimes when we are in the position of doing the hurting, we always say, but I didn't mean it. Oh, that's not what I meant. But how can we hold both? That sometimes our intent doesn't land as an intent. It can actually have a harmful consequence. In terms of confidentiality, we invite you to freely share your learning with other people from this session, and at the same time to preserve the sacredness of others sharing here and preserve their own need for safety and confidentiality. So just notice which of these guidelines you most need for yourself today, and then hold that. Thank you. So now just to shift to, if I have it right, Dorcas, I'm going to do a teaching on contemplative practice.
That's right.
Yep. So what is this thing about contemplative practice? You are going to watch a 2.5-minute video on what is contemplative practice. And it's a video that was developed by Contemplative Mind in Society. They do contemplative practices in higher education. And by all means, we've gathered lots of resources. So whatever resources we talk about, we'll send them to you afterward. And if you also want other resources, do ask, we can share with one another. So I'm going to play the video twice. Jürgen is going to play that twice. And Jürgen is silent. Jürgen is my husband. He's our tech host today. Thank you, Jürgen. So in this video, it's titled, What is Contemplative Practice? As you listen to it, the first 2.5 minutes, just notice what moves you. Maybe you want to write some keywords that land for you, or ideas that it sparks. And then we're going to play it for a second time so that it can wash over you again, and notice and write a word or a phrase that moves you. It's actually in both times. Just notice a word or a phrase that most moves you, or a couple words or phrases that move you. And so in the chat, I am going to invite you to write the word or phrase that most stood out for you, that resonated with you about what contemplative practice is.
So I think if I remember correctly, Althea, we were going to give an option for people just to say it out loud if they would like to.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Very succinctly though, because time is of essence. So just a couple of words, one or two that struck you. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then please feel free to write it in the chat and we will read that.
Maybe I can come in on that before I forget. For me, I think the very opening phrase, which was very quick, so I think I've remembered it correctly. For me, chat is all about getting into a position where I can interact with somebody else who's living without hope and bring hope.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you so much. Serene says, lose yourself in it. Muller says, intentional, authentic living. Nancy says, connection of inner and outer. Be present, a conduit in a loving way. Yaku says, allow you to pause and lose yourself in. Carol says, how I am in the world and how I want to be in the world. Zipporah says, allowing yourself to pause and slow down. Rihanna says, moving to be more grounded and become a conduit to love, which allows me to connect to everybody and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Althea says, this poem comes to mind. So let us pick up the stones over which we stumble, friends, and build altars. The world is big and wide and wild and wonderful and wicked, and our lives are murky, magnificent, malleable, full of meaning. Oramus, let us pray. Wow, yeah. Embodied life. Contemplative practices lead us into life. Life-giving words that everyone mentioned. Yeah, thank you so much. So from the perspective of healing from racism, what does contemplative practice has to do with healing from racism, and how do we make practical and alive a contemplative practice that speaks to healing and recovery and our wounding? Dorcas and I are going to share an example from our own life, and we are going to try to do this in 3 minutes. So I want to invite you, Dorcas, as a white person, how have you present contemplative practice for your own healing from racism?
So I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes, but it's going to be a little longer. So I ask you to bear with me because I don't want to talk too fast. So the context for my story that integrates contemplation with racial healing, it takes place in the early 80s in Jackson, Mississippi. I was in my mid-20s. Jackson, Mississippi is a racially segregated southern state in America. And I was part of a multiracial, multicultural church and ministry. And we encountered at some point that Black youth that were raised in the church became now young Black adults and wanted to own more of the leadership within the fellowship and within the body of the ministry. And so they felt they were being marginalized, and indeed they were, by white leadership. Very good intentioned white Northerners came down from the north and took up leadership positions. And these young Black adults were now finding their voice and demanding change. And so a series of meetings were set up called reconciliation meetings to provide a forum for discussion and a way forward so that we could work together. These meetings became very heated at times. There was Black folks pushing in and white folks pushing back. And I attended the first meeting, felt very overwhelmed in some ways, and decided this was not about me. I was not guilty of what these Black folks were saying. You know, I had been there for a while. I had been in Mississippi for a couple of years. I had done all these wonderful things. Why were they telling me I wanted to be in control? Why were they telling me that I was not open to other cultures? So I became very defensive myself. And I decided I was not going to attend any more of these meetings. So at the time, I went home, and I happened to be living with my late brother-in-law, who is now deceased, African-American, very influential leader in the community and in the church, and married to my sister. And I went back, and I expected to, you know, find some real stroking and some consolation from him. I went to him and I said, so what shall I do? You know, I don't feel I need this. I don't feel I need this. And he very firmly yet kindly said, you need to go back. You need to be there as long as you feel the need to be defensive. That set me in a spin, and I felt very wounded. And so I kind of went off by myself, kind of introverted, and decided, okay, I need to find out what's going on here. I tried my prayers, I tried my meditations, nothing really helped. And I remember one evening feeling very much that I was kind of at the end of myself and didn't know how to get through this. And that's one thing about contemplation. Sometimes you really do need to face a very dark night of unknowing before the light comes on. And so I came to the end of my ideas, and I sat on our front porch and I said to myself, okay, what? And that was when I heard from, for me, my higher power, the divinity within, whatever you want to call it. And I sat there. And in that time of contemplation, the wisdom came. And I knew and I realized that I was one person in a historical culture of white dominance. And for me, I needed to accept that. I needed to embrace that I was part of that, whatever emotion that came with that. And I needed to take responsibility and not shrink from it. So the light came. I lost my defensiveness, and I continued to attend the meetings, and I stayed. And that is my story. And now over to you, Althea, for your story.
Thank you. And I just want to welcome Sinduka. Sinduka, it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, please put in the chat where you are dialing in from and what time it is there with you.
Okay, let me do that. Thank you.
Ooh, thank you for sharing that. You know what I'm noticing, what is arising for me, so one of the ways in how I practice contemplation for healing is working with memory that arises in me. And right now, as Dorcas was speaking, there's a new memory that I hadn't forgot about. It just arose in me. And what I'm remembering is there was my manager's manager who was Black. We sat in a restaurant one day and she said to me, sometimes you look Indian and sometimes you look like a Kaffir. And then she paused, like me. I mean, so Kaffir in South Africa is not quite, but it's almost similar to nigger, but even worse. It's a really hurtful term. And so that memory is arising in me right now. And I'm noticing in myself how the internalized violence that Black people internalize in themselves is also directed at me. So I have a pain in my heart.
Mm.
I can feel that sensation in my heart. How I'm using my contemplative practice for healing from racism is really working with the impact of rage. It's that movement between rage and rest. By the time I was 9 years old, I had a fantasy that my parents are like by my grandmother's house. Well, my whole family, my biological family is by my grandmother's house. And we taking off our skin like it's a cloth, like a piece of clothes. We're taking it off and voila, we are white. It's like, we accept it, we are white. That's the nature of the internalized oppression. Fast forward to when I was 14 years old, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm walking to school in Belhar. My parents were forced to move to Manenberg. They found themselves, built themselves back up on their foot, and they bought a house in Belhar, which was deemed for colored people. And it was just a sand place. Nothing, there was nothing, no lights, no infrastructure, just white sand. And this is in 1984, 85, with a student uprising. And I'm walking to school. I'm 14, 15 years old. The school is 5 minutes from the house. And I'm like, just by the school, and there's a buffalo coming. So the buffalo was one of the military vehicles. It was an open, and you could maybe have 17, 20 men with guns in the buffalo. It's not even yet 8 o'clock, and this military vehicle is coming because our communities were militarized, not police, militarized. They're coming. And in me wells, firstly, exhaustion, a deep exhaustion at 14 years old, and then the rage comes. And then the first time in my life, I'm picking up a stone because I'm so angry. And I want to throw the stone at these young men who are 18, 20 years old with massive rifles, right? In that moment, when I picked up the stone and I wanted to throw the stone, I heard the voice of God in that moment. And the voice said, God is love. I had to, the South Africans will know, you know, when by your school you got that green wire fence. I had to go to the green wire fence to hold onto the fence because I nearly fell over. Today, in that video, they talked about opening up the heart. I use my contemplative practice to open up the gut because I think that's where rage sits, deep rage. And it was maybe 5 months ago that I revisited that scene again. I had my meditation and I was sharing that story with some people. And after that, I had my meditation and I got up from the meditation. Jürgen wasn't here in the house. And I walked in the passage. As I walked in the passage, I do think it was divine presence that gifted me with the feeling of what my nervous system felt like at that time, something that I couldn't access. And I literally was about to fall. It was my whole nervous system was fully impacted. And again, I had to hold on to the walls. There's no place for me really to talk and process that experience of 14 years old. And today at 52, I'm 52. And I'm going back over and over again to digest that. And every time I digest that, there's something more that gets released.
Yeah. So,
yeah, to invite my black body to rest, because the world doesn't give my black body space to rest. So that's how it shows up for me. I'm just wondering if there's one or two questions, burning questions about using contemplation for our racial healing.
One of the things that has come up in my contemplative time, and this has been ongoing for several years, is the concept of mourning, grief and mourning. And I struggled for a while with how to allow that to to walk in the world, to walk in my neighborhood in a way that is hopeful and life-giving, while at the same time feeling this very deep grief and heaviness for the reality of even my space in this Black neighborhood where I live, the space that I take up. And I was wondering if either of you could speak to that. Maybe Dorcas, as a white person, that feeling of deep mourning as being a positive outgrowth of anti-racism.
So Althea, I'm looking to you because is this the time to get into a discussion like this?
Well, I would just make one comment and say again, Nancy, I
certainly have a response.
If you have a short response, that would be okay.
Okay, so my response to that is, and I think we can talk more about this in our breakout groups. My response to that would be that I share that mourning. I in no ways equate it like yours, because we each have a different depth and sorrow in our hearts. So I understand that. I have always felt I have a faith, and I believe that God mourns, and I have been able to find comfort in that, in joining in the mourning that my higher power does, as she looks down on our world, and yet is also full of hope and love. And that's how I work with that.
In a few moments, we're going to go into creative work around our racial timeline. And so it could be anything, but perhaps that's something that you could contemplate on. What I do want to say is that I want to encourage the work of grief. We must grieve.
Yes.
It's not good to keep it in our bodies. We get sick.
Yeah.
And so we have to grieve. The Buddhists, I don't know the many Buddhist traditions, but the Buddhist tradition from Thich Nhat Hanh and in the Plum Tree Village, they have a practice called Avalokiteshvara. You can look it up on Google or the internet, but it's a sacred chanting. It's a beautiful piece of music and a sacred chanting. You sit for 20 minutes and you welcome your grief and let grief arise and notice the grief. And as we notice the grief, that practice of noticing our grief keeps our hearts open and supple and compassionate to the grief of others. So I just wanted to say to encourage that. Maybe just show you one or two slides before going into group work, back to contemplative practice. So contemplation really is the slowing down to present awareness that deepens our capacity for taking a long and loving look at the real, to be with what's really inside our experience and allowing ourselves to be moved by what we find there. So Nancy, to your point, to be moved by what we find, whether it's grief, rage, depression, desire to kill, desire to die, to look at that. Contemplation leads us to intentional action in the world, to love in the world. The gift of creating space for contemplation is that it helps us break through the limitations of our personal and our social conditioning into transforming ourselves through a new way of seeing and being that's rooted in love for ourselves, for others, for the world, to a higher power. And so in relation to contemplation, it's a lifelong work to unlearn racism. And this lifelong work is everyday work. It's every moment work. It's work over time. It's work in deep time, in past, present, and future. It's work across the generations. And so today, when we talk about racism, what Dorcas and I are meaning and defining as racism is that oppression that involves one group having power to carry out systemic discrimination through institutional policies and practices of the society, and by shaping the cultural beliefs, the values, even the interpersonal relationships that support racist policies and practices. So racism equals racial prejudice. We all have racial prejudice, equals racial prejudice, plus the social and institutional power. Racism equals a system of advantage based on race. Racism is a system of oppression based on race. Racism is white supremacy. Racism is the privileging of white people and the devaluing of people of color. And all of us have been impacted by racism. So our experience of racism systemically and personally invites us to the healing of ourselves, the healing of our relationships, the healing of institutions, and the healing of society. Contemplative practices vary. There are many different ways. And so, today we're going to experience in a moment the creative aspect through contemplative art. At the moment, we are mirroring for us the relational aspect of contemplation through deep listening, storytelling, dialogue. At the beginning, we started with some stillness practice. So it could be mindfulness, centering, silence, sitting meditation. Contemplation can be generative, a gratitude practice, a sacred reading, loving kindness meditation. It could be activism, vigils, marches, volunteering, bearing witness. Sometimes there's a false perception of contemplation, that it's just quiet. But the outcome of our contemplation is action in the world. There's movement, yoga, tai chi, meditation, there's the rituals across many cultural and spiritual traditions, retreats, and establishing sacred space. So these are all, and that list is not exhaustive. I think because of time, shall we shift into the exercise, Dorcas? Or is there perhaps one burning question that is wanting to be asked? Great. So you are going to work off screen, and we invited you to bring your drawing material. So for the next 20 minutes, we invite you to go in. Just notice the shift to go inward in yourself and draw your racial timeline. So there are many different ways you can draw your racial timeline. You can draw it by events, any key events. It could be a trauma or wonderful events, or both. You can draw that in the sequence of events. It could be by theme. Maybe there's just one focus issue that you are sitting with and you want to draw it. And when we're talking about drawing, it's drawing anyhow how you draw it, you know, even if you just make lines, if you just make stick figures, this is not about perfection. This is about expressing your inner experience on paper. And when you do the drawing, we invite you to draw with the language of your body. The big thing is, do not overthink it. Just draw what comes to you, what moves you. It could even be drawing an emotional state. And so we will have that space in stillness to draw. Is there any questions about the activity? What we are inviting you to do? You have a smile, Serene. Like so.
So can I just add that for some of us who are not very right brain, if it needs to be like a grid or even a linear thing with dates and times and events, that's acceptable too. Anything that you would like to do like that.
Thanks, Dorcas. What we're inviting here is letting your unconscious speak. We don't know what will come. Yeah. Great. So it's 25 past the hour. Draw. So 3 minutes to when 20 minutes is finished. I'll just let you know that you got 3 more minutes to do that. Enjoy your drawing. Be with your drawing. Invite it. You can keep your camera on or keep it off.
So the reason why this is important is because we are going to divide into our racial identity groups for the breakout session. And I hope that you all had an enjoyable time with your racial timelines. If you've never done it before, it's a different kind of an out of body kind of experience. But I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful for you. So Jürgen is going to divide us into breakout groups according to the racial identity that we attributed to ourselves. And then in there's going to be discussion, and then will be another plenary session.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's just be a minute in silence and notice just what you heard, the essence of what you heard people say, and the experience that you had in your racial identity groups. I will let us know when that minute is up, and even listen to what you heard yourself say. Also just noticing the feeling in your body now. slowly just shift from your interior noticing to our collective being together, knowing that you can always go back to that place of personal reflection whenever you need to. Yeah. Thank you, Zipporah. You put in the chat that you need to have your camera off. Senduka has challenges with her camera, and Rihanna is listening. She's just needing to pick up her daughter. So let's begin first with the white group. And perhaps for like 7 minutes or so, what was the essence that came out of the conversation from your group? Dorcas, I will hand over to you to prod and explore further we need. I will keep my my timer on for about 7 minutes.
So
go ahead.
As I listened to the various members share, the word that, or the concept, the idea, the essence was awareness, dawning, which happened in various times in the different individuals' lives. And then also their reaction to that, their emotional reaction to that awareness was different. There was some strong emotions expressed. And I'd like for them to say more about that if they feel free to share in this plenary session. I know, Mueller, if I can call you out, you expressed a word that kind of triggered a question, and that word was disgust. And I think that's a really revealing and honest word. Can you say more about that, or do you feel free to share more about that?
Yes, as I'm nearing the end of my term as a minister, looking back, and that's both my ministry, the ministry of my church, the ministry of the different congregations, the political and social systems we have, educational systems and so on. There's a growing disappointment that we haven't reached anything significant, and it's going past the point of only being disappointed and feeling trapped. I was part of military training, and I was a minister in the military service, and even then, okay, I was very young, but I should have been able to do much better. And looking back at my own ministry and as a country and all these different institutions, we should have done better, and we didn't. And it is just kind of inexcusable. So the word disgust is it's raw, but it's what it is. It's my experience.
And Nancy, you mentioned an awakening and an awareness. Can you just kind of reiterate that to the group?
Yeah, what I shared was how, as a child and a young person, my preoccupation was mostly with our denomination, and we looked very different in the way we dressed and so forth. That preoccupied me. In our home, there was not much. I don't remember conversations about race. I do remember anything that was said was negative. I gave the example of Martin Luther King was probably a communist. I remember, I'm pretty sure, hearing that in our home. And so when I went to Mississippi, where living in Jackson in the neighborhood that we did was almost like living in a developing country. This sharp difference from where I came from in terms of economy and poverty. And that began then an awakening, which involved in my life initially denial as far as my part in it, and eventually led to a deep grief as my eyes were opened and my heart was opened to the white supremacy of our country, which in my opinion infiltrates every institution, including the church, and does to this day. And that was the beginning of my moving forward in that, in the whole work of anti-racism.
Thank you. Thank you, Mueller and Nancy. So Rihanna, I don't believe is free, and I'm not going to call anybody else out because I don't want to put anybody else out on the spot. But we had some very honest expression and sharing, and a lot of it centered around this whole awakening and not necessarily liking what we saw as we were awakened. And so I think the challenge, and one of the things we ended with was talking about ways forward, even though we are involved, is there ways that we can be more intentionally involved and maybe do some redemption of some of that disgust and awakening and ignorance that we had or have, because it is an ongoing process.
Thank you. May I prod a little and ask you, Dorcas or Yaku or Derek, you talked about awakening, disgust, denial, grief. Were there any other emotions that you all named that haven't yet been named?
I think, go ahead. No, go ahead, Jaco.
You must help me to be honest, but I don't think from my side there was other emotions that I spoke about. But you can call me out if I'm lying now, or if I can't remember correctly, please.
I don't remember now.
Yeah, okay.
When you checked in, Yaku, you know, it sounded also like there was frustration when at the beginning was.
I think that is now part of the legacy of South Africa, I think, which I feel as a younger generation person I have to deal with. The frustrations of our past, and it's not something that what's the correct way to say this? I'm angry maybe at my parents and at them and what they did in their time. I don't know what impact they had necessarily, but I'm frustrated because it's now up to my generation to work towards a more justified living in South Africa. I was recently in a lecture where the guy said, how many times must we whites apologize for what we've done in the past, or what has happened in our country in the past? And he answered the question himself. He's a professor at Pretoria University, Professor De Beer, and he said, as long as it takes and as many times as it takes, because we still live systemically very divided, white areas, black areas, and until that changes, nothing has really changed. So yeah, it is, but my emotions that I spoke about in the beginning was very much because of the past, not necessarily my timeline, which I shared with the group necessarily. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's just pause in a moment of silence, absorbing and honoring the work that this white group in this configuration did. Thank you so much. And so now we give 7 minutes to the people of color group, and wondering and inviting you all to share what did you notice came up in the conversation. Welcome to speak for yourself, for your own noticing of the themes that came up or the noticing of your timeline.
Althea, if I may, there was such a, for me, a synergy between my timeline and my picture and everybody else's story. And even though we all chose to respond to your question somewhat differently, for me, there was this commonality of very personal experience and soreness around those experiences, and we all appear to struggle to to find a succinct way to represent that, because it's so plentiful and vast in its makeup. So there was I guess if you ask me to notice, that's the thing that I noticed. We can certainly connect to story, but it felt hard and it felt like a graft, and it also felt insurmountable in some ways because there were so many, and translating that into 20 minutes of a picture felt challenging, and not entirely reflective of our journeys to date, but it did surface some very personal moments for each of us. I think that's what I would offer in terms of observing our group and the dialogue that went on there.
Thank you, Serene. Who would like to share next? Carol, was that like a coming in, coming out?
Yeah, for me, it was, I observed that because of the way I look fair, people don't always realize that I am, as we used to say, so-called colored. And therefore, I didn't really experience the racism that some of the others in our group experienced. But I internalized it that I was inferior to white people. And from nothing specific that I can really say. And I still feel uncomfortable when I'm with a group of white people. I'm in an art group, they're all white, but I still feel like I don't belong. When I was at university, I just did not feel comfortable. In any case, in those days, it was still segregation. And if I had made friends with them, which I did with some, we wouldn't have been able to go out together to places. And yeah, so a lot of my anger also is from what my parents experienced and friends have experienced. So it's almost like I'm on the outside looking in, but I feel that anger still. And as I said earlier, just looking at how clever they were, the Nats, in organizing apartheid. I mean, I look at Langa, it's a little township, but it's enclosed by, I think there's 3 roads, but there's only 2 entrance roads. So if they wanted to cut it off, they could, they being the government. And there's just so many little things like that. The amount of money spent on education, or the difference between the amounts, the wages. My father was a teacher. Oh my gosh, he did 3 or 4 other things at the same time to try and make enough money to keep his family going. So yeah, that's about how it made me feel doing that timeline.
Thank you, Carol, for sharing. Wondering, Sinduka, Zipporah, or Rihanna, if there's something that you're wanting to share or feel moved to share about your noticings or what arose from the conversation. I noticed there was like a pot energy. There was pot energy. Thanks, Rihanna, for that message. Yes, thank you. There was a pot energy that was like, I don't want to do this exercise. Some people talked about having resistance and anger because it takes you into pain. And there was more of a page. It's not enough space to even draw this thing. It was, the women talked very in good language around this, but for me, when I sense beneath that, so it might not, if it's not if it's like not your interpretation for those who it's relevant, but it was almost like the energy was like, fuck off, a page.
Yeah.
So, and those who had that reaction stayed with it and talked about accessing deeper wounds, deeper pain. There's also the experience, I was reminded, this is not the same, I was reminded about the experience of sometimes when Black Africans go to America and there's another rude awakening about race.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a country that's predominantly Black, outside of South Africa, not South Africa, but if you live in a country that's predominantly Black and you go into white worlds, sometimes it's a rude awakening to actually realize, oh, they call me Black.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of pain and a sense that a page is not enough, and historical pain. Yeah. Did I miss anything? Did I misrepresent anything? People in my group?
I think you really put it well. Oh, excuse me. Are you
Go
sure?
Go, please go.
Yeah, I just say you put it really well about the rude awakening when you're from a country like Kenya, like I wasn't, and I learned in theory what all this is about. You know, in textbooks, in history textbooks that are very nonchalant, and then you come here and you have the experience of it, where a classmate in a Bible college calls you a monkey. You know, there's a debate in the class where they say that all the descendants of Nimrod are African people, and they are really digging into the Bible to try and prove this. And you're like, wow, Nimrod, you know, Noah's grandson who was cursed. So yeah, those kinds of things do yeah, shock you.
Thanks, everyone. So Althea, you asked whether we missed anything, and I just wanted to maybe also just mention that some of which was present in the room was this notion that yes, connecting with and experiencing, almost re-experiencing stories and sharing stories of past was hard enough, but it's still present in so many perhaps new forms today. And that was something that also came through in some of the stories and some of the sharing. Yeah, I was just reminded as you were speaking about, I'm still opening up a textbook in South Africa, teaching my grade 4 niece, and the language in the textbook speaks about who discovered Table Mountain. and that person is not from here, and they're not Khoisan, and they're not, and I get so irate because yeah, so just to also mention that whilst it was hard to unpack the past, it remains hard because there's still so much present around us at the minute.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know. If I can just mention about anger, you talked about anger earlier. There's a lot of anger in America, a lot of anger and fear. And I don't know how much you know about the current climate, but yeah, there's a lot of polarization, and it seems like we've gone back about 60, 50 years. So there's enough anger to go around, anger and fear. And I think bringing it up to modern day, like you say, Serena, it's happening today. This is our context that we live in. And I wish we could have a whole other hour to talk about how we move ahead, how we remain true to who we are and yet function prophetically in our world today. That's huge.
Thank you, Dorcas. Part of our healing work is to create space to explore the texture of anger and rage and know how to tend to it well. One of the people in our group gave such a powerful analogy in the short time. They talked about resisting and being really angry about doing this. And then they went to eat ice cream. It's like cooling, like how to cool and tend. But we need a much wider variety of appropriate measures to tend to the worry and the depth of anger that is eating at the tissues in people. Real solutions. From the history of South Africa, when I first attended this truth and reconciliation work, a couple of days, what struck me is that it was people from India that put it on. wasn't South Africans, but they felt inspired by the South African story. And healing from racism requires like an equivalent, one of the things that it requires, like an equivalent of the 12 steps, that on any day, in any city where you are, you can go to a healing from racism group that meets regularly, and you can pour your heart, you can be witnessed. It is a level of healing that everyone needs to access. And I'm really hoping, if not in my generation, but by the next generation, there will be healing from racism groups or healing from oppression groups in every city where people go and just talk what is eating at the tissues and be held in beloved community and return to loving themselves. So we are, it's nearly 10 to the hour, and 3 hours is short. But I'd like to hand over to Dorcas. And so just wanting to honor and thank you, appreciate the people of color who shared. So perhaps just let's pause for 30 seconds, noticing and honoring the sharing and the voicing and the letting out what needed to be let out. Thank you.
So I'm going to end with some closing thoughts. There's a quote by Harriet Tubman, and I'm going to read the quote, and then I'm going to read you a story about very short story about who Harriet Tubman was. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. We talked about some dreams. Althea, you just mentioned one. Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars, to change the world. So Harriet Tubman, who wrote that, was born into slavery in the American South. She was brutalized by her overseer when she was 15, and she decided to leave and to escape. And she made her way to freedom on her own, escaping dogs and men on horseback. She would hide by day and travel by night, and she followed the North Star. And she eventually became the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. She made 19 dangerous trips, leading more than 300 slaves to freedom. And she was a contemplative. She would often dialogue with her ancestors, her God, and the stars. And she said, out of that, she said, every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. So let's just take a moment to exhale and to release. We've said a lot, we've done a lot, we've talked, we've thought a lot. I think some of us have thought things that we didn't say. Let's just take a moment to exhale. And you can even either close your eyes or just sit quietly, focus on something for these next couple of moments while we take our closure from each other. So take a moment to reflect on what you are feeling right now. Are there elements of our time together that you are grateful for? You can acknowledge these quietly. And then acknowledge the things that are unfinished or troubling. Sometimes it feels, or you may feel, that this is all too hard and way too messy, can never be figured out. And especially after a time like this, when you have maybe disclosed some raw emotion, it feels that way. Don't run from it. Offer yourself gentleness and patience after you leave this space to treasure, to feel, and to grow from what has emerged. Guard your heart and soul, for it may be softened by this time of sharing. Emerge slowly into the demands of your life after this time together. And I want to leave you with this blessing by Jan Richardson. That you will know your vision and live into it. That you will withstand the onslaught that comes. That places of necessity and places of horror will give way to wonder and possibilities. That you will see, that your seeing will change you. That your seeing will change the world. To be with all of you all today. I respect your journeys. I respect your space and your life and the challenges. And so for me, thank you for sharing this time with me. And knowing that we have followers, that we have fellow warriors, as it were, warrioresses across the globe that are in this journey together. Over to you, Althea, for closing statement.
Thank you so much for that reading. So that was an example of the generative contemplative practice, sacred reading that you just gave us, and stillness. Oh, how I wish we had more time. In hindsight, I wish I had planned a day. I wish Dorcas and I had planned a day, because it's just a little bit of opening and then we have to close. What I so appreciated was the voices, the diversity of South African voices, the diversity of American voices, the diversity of family voices, the diversity of team voices, the diversity of women voices, the diversity of male voices. And I really appreciated the desire for healing that is in everyone's stories. And in fact, it's a desire for healing that brought us here, however we phrase it. It's a real desire for healing. And so my heart has been expanded because of being here. My gut is more sore because of being here. But my gut has been expanded to hold greater, wider perspectives, greater stories. My desire is that you remember any simple contemplative practice, especially in the moments when we are activated and we are caught in those emotions of disgust, of rage, of anger, of woundedness, that we would remember as adults in the now, we have capacity to return love to us in some way or form, and give that love to us and to one another. Jürgen, I would ask you if you can put Dorcas and my email addresses in the chat, if there's any resources that people want. We did put together a book list or resource list that we will send to you. We will certainly send you and make sure that we send you this video. Again, if you haven't and you really don't want to be in the published video, please feel free to share with us. And so perhaps as an invitation, you can either speak a word or a phrase or write in the chat an appreciation of the time that you are walking away with.
Can I check out with a thought and just an appreciation, which is more than one word? I came here wanting to connect to personal story, and as I've done in many times before, and so just really grateful for your challenge actually to try and do it differently and in another way, because through that it surfaced some stuff for me that I wasn't prepared for, and certainly gives me quite a bit to be with, and think more about and contemplate more deeply over. So I just want to say thank you for the newness of today. It was surprising, and what a gifting, actually. Just really, really thanks for that.
Thank you, Serene. Serene and I used to work together at BP.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yako said challenge to rethink. Nancy says thank you, Althea and Dorcas, for your leadership and example. Muller says blessings to all. May kindness and softness be your hearts on your way. Thank you so much. Looking forward to next time. Me too. Carol says it was so good to be able to actually talk about the way I feel and hear from others as well. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome to stay. Dorcas and I will be available for 5 more minutes here on the call. If anyone hasn't said what they wanted to say, there's 5 more minutes on the call. May all be well. Carol, oh, hugs to you. May you be blessed and may your work in Langa grow.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zipporah. I'm so richer and fuller. Thank you. Zinduka, it was healing in many ways. Thank you so much.